Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to kick off today with some more supergroups, checking out bands comprised of members from other bands. Today we're checking out Sumac, which has Bryan Cook from Russian Circles, Nick Yakishin from Baptists and Genghis Tron, and Aaron Turner from House of Low Culture, Old Man Gloom, and an old member of ISIS. We're going to be checking out the track Image of Control, which on Spotify, the two movements are two separate tracks, but the first one is about 4 minutes and the second one is 6. Let's dive into this and see what Sumac is bringing to the table today. Coming in large right from the start. Oh, just okay. I thought they were gonna do something with that energy. Hoping movement 2 is a little more cohesive. That little bass lick. Dude, I don't know what the time signature is here. I counted 11.5 beats, give or take. Maybe we're working on 23 beats of eighth notes. I don't have time to figure out the best series of bars to work that within. All I know in that last section was that the guitar and drums were in a different idea than the vocals were rhythmically. See, here everybody's sort of lining up with this 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Even the vocals were in the last. Yeah, see, we're getting weird again. If anyone's done a rhythmic breakdown of this track, point me in that direction. I'm real curious, because I'm not gonna pick it up on a first time. Yeah, really interesting holding that note out on guitar, allowing, yeah, letting the bass take the lead movement. Dude, the tone on these instruments is just monstrous. Just overwhelming display of power. Even these small sounds are enormous due to all the pedals and effects they have on them. You know, this is one of those songs where it doesn't really matter if you have context for it or an explanation of what you're getting in store for. There's no way to know. There's no way to prepare yourself for what's about to happen to your mind, your ears. Let's start from the beginning. Movement 1. This cements a very important element to this, if nothing else, this song in general, image of control, both movements. It might be an indication towards a larger idea that Sumac plays around with, but if nothing else, again, this 10 minutes of music is very experimental. Not all of the time, of course. There are some moments where it's just straightforward post metal, but it's not afraid to try new things, prominently from a sound direction, as we saw in our ending. Plicks and plunks and all sorts of small little sounds. Look, it sounded like some of it was playing up above the what's that thing at the top of the neck of the guitar before you get to the head, and it's a little plastic bridge that holds all the strings in place. If you play above that, though, between that and the tuning heads, you get some really chirpy, plucky stuff because there's a lot of tension on a very short amount of string. There's not a lot of place for the vibrations to go, which is actually how strings work. When you just hold down parts of the strings on the guitar, you're changing the pitch by changing the distance of the string. And the distance there is just really small. So you're getting these really high-pitched, plucky things, and they don't resonate for very long. Any sort of vibrations are removed quickly. And I think that's how they're getting some of those sounds there at the end. But, I mean, it's not something your average guitar player is going to put in a song other than maybe just a quick rundown. Take the pick and just like tick, 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 and get 6 quick chirps out of it as a texture thing, maybe at the end of a phrase or something. But here it sounded like the guitarist is just exclusively playing in that area. And of course, running these chirps through all of their compression, their distortion, their overdrive, and creating a very unique, large sound out of these small sounds. And we hear the ways that the dissonance between them is amplified throughout all the overdrive and all that stuff. We hear a lot of that in Image of Control. It's about sonic experimentation, making new sounds out of the instruments that they have at play. It's not really about putting together something that is cohesive from a traditional musical standpoint. It is about crafting an atmosphere. It's about setting a tone and a mood and saying, this is what you're in store for. If you can't handle this right here, don't take a step forward. This is the warning before the roller coaster that says those who are pregnant or have heart problems don't get on the ride. Yeah, that's what Image of Control Movement 1. It showcases and establishes an experimental notion to the band and says there's possibility that this is going to show up in the future. If you don't like it now, and get off the ride before it starts, because once we kick into movement 2, there's no stopping points. You're in for the long haul. And I do find that to be really cool. It's not my cup of tea. It tends to err on the side of esoteric, just a hair bit too much for me. I never quite connected it with any of Movement 1 aside from just an arm's reach artistic appreciation for the experimentation. But I do think that I would like to hear more stuff like that. Show me all of this overdrive and distortion and compression, but with unusual sounds. I'd like to see what people do with that. If nothing else, just for my curiosity. Again, I may not enjoy it, but I do like seeing music getting pushed, its boundaries expanded, and I do think Sumac did a little bit of that with this opening movement. And like I said, we get to hear more tasteful usage of those experimental sounds in movement too. It keeps things spicy. Nothing, you don't really have time to get bored. They're always going to introduce something a bit more unique to the song. So yeah, like I said, experimentation, just a strong element of this song here. Now, movement one wasn't just sonic experimentation, though. The last minute or so of it is an isolated guitar. This, I feel, is just a typical intro idea. I don't know if this melody ever got repeated anywhere in the second movement. I didn't hear it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there. Um, but to me, it's an isolated intro. It kind of picks up some energy from that chaos, that experimentation. I almost want to say it was free form. I just kind of sound like a bunch of people playing sounds, running through stuff. Nothing really there was, I felt, designed to be synergistic in any way, aside from just crafting the atmosphere. So if that was all improvised, that would not surprise me. But here we reach something that is definitively precomposed. And it introduces a foundation of where we are going to go. Particularly by the time we start off movement two, this guitar plays a single note that reverbs, resonates into the next track, the second movement here, and pretty much as soon as we get there, all of the weight and heaviness comes in. This is our scale. This says this is our one. A single instrument playing a single line. Here's intensity level 1. Also, here's intensity level 10, and it just creates that contrast that allows it to feel as much of an impact as it does when the song kicks in proper, when everybody's coming in. I do enjoy that. I think that's a fantastic use of an intro. It is a great way to have that contrast kick in to allow the song to have the punch and impact that it does, but it also provides a moment of release from the overbearing sound of the beginning of movement one, but also to take the chaos of the beginning of movement one and create something a bit more controlled, restrained, and traditional to ease us into the pre-composed part that is the entirety of movement two. It just acts as a great transition in every way into the song proper of Image of Control movement two. Now, what is going on with movement two? Geez. The experimentation comes through in another level, this one being temporal. As I mentioned, I have no idea what time signature we're in half the time. There is certainly rhythmic discrepancies between the band and the vocalist, which is wild because I went and looked up the personnel real quick. I had mentioned who they were at the beginning, but I didn't mention what they play. Bryan Cook is the bassist, Nick Yakishin is the drummer, and Aaron Turner is both guitarist and vocals. Now, if my assumption is correct, and that there is a polyrhythmic idea going on between the band and the vocals, which I do feel one person, Aaron, is on both sides of this polyrhythmic idea. Now, I don't know how drummers do what they do polyrhythmically. I mean, we talk about some of the, polyrhythmic greats out there. Their multi-limb independency is just ridiculous. But at least to me, that sort of makes a little bit more sense. I've tried to do some stuff and I can kind of get away with it, but it's more about it's all drumming though. I think that's the thing. It's all hands and legs, and so I can just focus in on that. But I have tried to play bass in particular and vocal and sing vocals at the same time, and it just does not work. I can't get my brain to send out two musical signals, one to my hands and one to my mouth. It just doesn't work for me. And so I don't know, doing that while also having drastically different rhythmic ideas on both is just mind blowing. And listening to it happen here is just, I don't know. There'll be in time, there'll be like boom, 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 and there'll be like two accent beats here, and then one from the band, and then the band will accent, and then they'll both accent one, and then it'll be just an accent from the vocals, the band will dip down, and then they'll separate even further. Like, it's just, it's wild. Their accent points are sometimes together, sometimes not, and this dude's doing both simultaneously. It just, stuff like that blows my mind. It really does. But it also creates discrepancies in the timing of it all. It makes it difficult to figure out what time signature we're in. And then we get to a point where I think I've counted it out and I landed somewhere between 11 and 12 beats for a phrase. And I say somewhere between because I said 11, and then in my head I counted 12, but we had already changed. And I don't know where we repeated with, between beats 11 and 12. I had guessed it was probably 11 and a half, which would give us 23 eighth notes, which is just, what? I mean, now that I think about it, it's just one beat shy of 24, which would be 4 bars of 6 beats each. But the fourth bar is only going to be 5 beats, so we got 6 6 6 5. That's not entirely uncommon, especially in progressive metal. But the way that they do that with the polyrhythmic ideas in the vocals, it sounds bonkers. And that's even assuming I'm right and that the transition does come exactly halfway between beats 11 and 12, because otherwise, if it's a quarter of the way or 3/4 of the way, we're looking at an even wilder time signature, probably some sort of number of beats counted in 16th notes instead of eighths. It's just, here's the thing though, right? I can get into all the technicalities of the rhythmic components, but if you're listening to it, it just flows. And I will always appreciate that. There is a strong groove to this track, and you really only feel the oddities towards the ends of really long phrases. We're not talking about like the end, because right there I was talking about, there's a possibility that every fourth bar is one beat short. But it doesn't feel that way in the song. It almost feels like they carry over that missing beat for another 4 bars or maybe for another 16 bars. And it doesn't ever feel like there's this hiccup until late into an idea, which is quite possible. You can always play phrases across bars. And that's also something that some of the best prog rock bands and prog metal bands have also done. This is exactly how Meshuggah works, how everything still fits into 4/4, even though they're using really strange groupings of notes. Because eventually, if you keep, playing over the lines, playing over the bars, you'll eventually reach a point where everything syncs back up in 4 bar phrases. And it's possible that that's what's happening here as well. Whatever the reason is, it sounds like there's a really strong sense of flow throughout these sections, and that the hiccup is, it's rare. It's sparsely implemented. I don't know how they do it. Like I said, if anybody knows of a video that breaks it down or an article that breaks down the rhythmic component of this track, let me know. I'm real curious about that. It's bonkers, and it's definitely, to me, the most experimental part of this, aside from just the sonic intro and outro of these two movements. The last thing I want to bring up is just the sheer size, scope, and production of all this. It's a very atmospheric band. There aren't any riffs in here that I would say are memorable, nothing that I think I could hum. It's just this overall feeling of weight, of being crushed. It's just, dude, the instruments are so large. I feel like with all the distortion and reverb and whatever they got going, they could strum once and like not have to touch the strings again for several minutes, and it just continues to still create sound. These Yeah, the production on it all is just massive. And that's the point of it. It's very post metal, larger than life, uh, atmospheric stuff. One thing that does stand out to me though is the verses, if we can call them that, at the beginning of movement two. They sort of entered a element that feels a bit more traditional. There are some more memorable elements to the beginning of the movement, especially compared with the end of the movement or movement one, which were a bit more esoteric and atmospheric. I thought it was really interesting to bring in something where there is a solidity, a physicality to the rhythmic components, the vocal delivery, and even the structure. Things seem to tighten up and begin to get a little bit more iterative in the beginning of movement two. I don't know if that was simply to accommodate the vocals, because when we don't have vocals, things definitely get more experimental than when we do. But I don't know if that's necessarily something they have to do. I don't know if it was just because we had that really experimental movement one that they wanted something a bit more traditional to kick off movement two, but it was something I noticed, is that the track got more experimental as we went into it and as the vocals showed up less frequently. Um, and just to tie into this, I think it was the final section, the second to last section, just the constant attacks on every beat from every instrument. The notes weren't really changing. It was just heaviness. That's it. Pitch didn't matter. It was just sound and rhythmic repetition. And it was a slow rhythmic repetition too, just quarter notes from everybody. Yeah, that was a really big moment. And then, of course, the juxtaposition there where we move from the lower note to the higher note, and we just stick on that over and over and over. And then the bass has their cool little bass line underneath that I thought was a really neat idea. It's one of those things that I think it's really difficult for a more melodic based composer to come up with. Even inside of metal, we think of riffs, they're still sort of melodic. It's still about driving that forward with changing of notes and rhythmic ideas. This takes a very different direction to come to something like this, of just having that higher note there with the bass moving underneath, because it crafts a very specific atmosphere. It isn't really interesting from a compositional standpoint. It's really interesting from a sonic standpoint, though. And I think that's where Sumac really excels here. They're not a technical band from what's on paper. It really is all about the production of it and knowing how to write interesting ideas that take advantage of the sound and production that they want out of it. I'm going to check out some lyrics for this and then we're going to wrap it up. I don't think I heard any words in the first movement, but apparently there were. Just a few. Turn aside, steady eyes belie the fear, small hollow words clatter to the ground, broken. That's it. Now it is called the image of control. The concept of viewing things of eyes are brought up a couple of times, and so I think that this first movement is about seeing this image of control and what it does to the viewer. Um, Small words mean nothing anymore. In fact, I might even read that as small, hollow words is not necessarily about small and hollow words, but that all words become small and hollow. Basically, language is useless to describe this image of control. It can only be explained as something you see or experience. The steady eyes are filled with fear and words fall to the ground. That's all that happens here. When we look at the music of it, it is difficult to describe. It is very atmospheric. Esoteric is a word that I use to describe movement one. It is sonic experimentation again, doing new things with music. This would be, I think, viewing this image and then the guitar solo is a sort of calm after that. I'm not sure what that's supposed to represent, but after this we move into movement 2, which picks up the weight, the atmosphere, the heaviness, all of that. And I'm not too sure what this is about. Once again, it's not a lot of lyrics. I didn't really hear a lot, primarily hearing them towards the beginning of the movement. It says, "Ruin has come, not fire, or in ashen rain, only in turgid silence. Hanging, flayed, submerged in presence, summoned, it expands with breath, filling rooms, welling up from the tar-choked springs, reeking black star, shining weary light, bloodied eyes, no tears, no light. Knowing not to what this moment's owed, only slipping and shuddering dance towards cold, radiant dissolve." It's definitely not a good thing. There's a lot of negative imagery here. Bloodied eyes, light being torn away, anything radiant dissolving down to nothing. There is ruin, but it's not by anything visually fascinating like ashen rain or fire. It's only ruin through silence. My assumption is that this person, having looked upon the image of control, has been blinded by it. They have bloody eyes, no longer seeing light. But I'm not sure about this ruin, unless it's some sort of like premonition that they had upon looking at this image, is that they were given this information about ruin to come and then left blinded by it. That's the best I can take on it. That's a very stereotypical fantasy viewing of it, though. But yeah, it all kind of goes over my head a little bit, as does the song, other than just the crushing weight of it all, which I think fits the lyrics in some way, at least just the descriptors used. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Sumac's image of control. What did you think of this one? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you just have your own thoughts, opinions, and perspectives about it. Toss all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for this one. We do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.